My name is Katerina. I'm co-founder of Future London Academy. And today we have a special guest, an incredible, fantastic, mesmerizing, super talented Claudia, the Chief Design Officer at citizenM Hotels. And Claudia actually had an incredible background in architecture that led her to this position before becoming a Chief Design Officer at citizenM Hotels, where she has been successfully leading the team for over 6 years. She also has been leading teams at Nike, company that doesn't need introduction, and Claudia has spent over 13 years there. So again, made a long-lasting impact in the company and led retail design teams there. Before that, Claudia actually also was a business owner leading her own practice, which gives another layer of interest to the conversation today when someone had to actually have two brains, the business brain and design brain from the very beginning. I am so excited to have Claudia today. Welcome. How are you?
Hi, Katerina. Thank you for having me today. Hi, everyone in the world I hear and see. I'm super excited to be here. I hope we have a great conversation and it's meaningful to people out there.
Brilliant. Let's dive in then with the main and big question a lot of people are thinking. Who is Chief Design Officer? Or rather, what does it mean to be a Chief Design Officer at citizenM Hotels? Because Chief Design Officer role is relatively new, even though it has been around for probably 10 years, but every company takes it very differently. So Chief Design Officer in one company is a very different job to another company. So would love to hear, what does it mean to be a Chief Design Officer in your company? What departments do you have? What do you look after?
Yeah. First of all, my background is architecture, obviously. So I started as an architect, worked as an architect for 10 years, and then moved into retail design with Nike. And then, the last almost now 7 years, I'm with citizenM Hotels. So we moved into hospitality. With that background, as you say, it's really not a common path. I would have never guessed where I am today. So it's not something I had actively planned, but it evolved over the years. Maybe I speak a little bit about citizenM because then you understand the context. citizenM is a owner operator in the hotel industry for a hotel chain. What that means is that the company basically has two parts. One is an integrated real estate development domain, and the other domain is operations of hotels, basically. So, I'm in the development part of the business, and that is the business where we find sites, we find buildings that we can remodel, whatever it is, in the big hubs, in the big global hubs of the world, and not an easy task. So we find the spots, we design them, we build them, and then we hand them over to operations for them to run the show. So for my part, obviously I'm looking over the design part of it and what does it entail. So because we're building the buildings for the most part ourselves, architecture is a big part of it. But we also are very deliberate about the guest experience that we provide. And we're a branded design company that has certain principles that we always apply. And so the interior look and feel is part of it. Art and styling is part of it. Products that are bespoke and developed by us is part of it. So it's a whole range of different skill sets that I'm overseeing.
Wow, that is a lot to look after, especially if you come from one very specific area like architecture that requires a lot of skills on its own, and suddenly you look after so many different departments. So first of all, how does it work structurally? Do you have separate departments? What kind of departments do you have at citizenM?
Yeah, so I think a really important thing to say is I'm not doing this alone. So I don't have to have all those skills. That's the beauty of it. We are a team. We have an in-house team of about 20 director, teams in the design department. But that is really only the team that is delivering the hotel. Then we have also other parts in the business like brand design and UX. They sit under the brand wing. And in order for us to really leverage all the disciplines in the whole company, we have created a studio in our offices, and we all work there together and even invite other creators from other functions to come and join us there and really leverage all the different expertise that we have in the company. We also, and that is really important to say, have a big range of, or not range, but there are some very critical partners that are not inside the company. So we have concrete architects who have been with citizenM from inception, so much, much longer than I have been here. And then it's brick studios, they're did the initial styling approach. So there's a lot of continuity in the design team, and that's actually really good because we can all learn from each other and build on each other's expertise.
Love it. So how does one transport from one discipline and particular job title? What was your journey to get to chief design officer position? First of all, did you always aspire to be a chief design officer? Is that was a clear career path and you planned the steps to get there? Did it happen out of nowhere? What was your role before? Or was there someone before as a chief design officer? So how did this happen? And what was the process of it happening?
Within citizenM, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was actually initially starting only looking after Europe and Asia. And there was another person looking after the United States. And that evolved very quickly into a role where I oversaw the entire global portfolio. To be honest, I know that the people who have the titles probably always say that, but the title isn't really meaning so much. My role would probably in a much bigger organization would be a VP role or a managing director. It could be anything. Yeah, it happens to be a chief design officer because also we're trying to keep the matrix as flat as possible. That means the more layers you add to it, the more complexity. So that is probably also part of it. But to answer your initial questions, it was not planned at all. So I would have really never thought that I would be in this place, which is a good news, I think, because I think a lot of things happen along your career journey. And if I would have had to say what I be in 20 years, it would only be what I knew 20 years ago. So my approach was always to kind of be sensitive for the moment when there's opportunities that I felt were really interesting for me, opportunities to learn something new and to acquire new skills. So whenever that happened or whenever I found an environment in which that was possible, that was something that I would go for. And that was my guiding principle, let's say, throughout the career.
So what kind of skills then did you have to acquire while you were progressing through this? Because when you get to the C-level, you have to drop a lot of things that you know to be successful. And you realize there are lots of things that you don't know that you have to learn. So what were the top skills that you had to learn when you got there?
It is a progression over the course of time, right? I think you start your career building a really solid foundation. At least that's what I did. A solid foundation in your core skills in your field, right? And then you move on to becoming a people manager. So you have to acquire all the skills that are necessary. The principle, it doesn't really matter whether you manage designers or other humans. It's a human skill set that you have to acquire as you start managing teams. That is, of course, the typical qualities like learning to truly listen and be aware, be self-aware. I think a lot of good leadership has to do with your own self-awareness. So you have to work on yourself as well. It's not just the others. And then as you move on then into the more senior level, I think the interesting aspect of it is really that you stop reporting into your peers, right? Like or into your expertise. I stopped reporting into design. I started reporting into the business. And so then your first team is a team of people who have absolutely no idea what you're talking about and why you care so much about certain things that they could not care less about. And so that translation of what design means for the business and what impact it can have on the business and the qualities it brings, that is something. So the communication piece of it, on the one hand side, understanding what the business KPIs are and how the business operates. And then on the other hand, how design impacts that business. I think if there was one thing, then I think the communication within that peer group, that's something definitely new to learn when you're a designer.
So let's dive into that. What does it mean to communicate to that peer group? Can you give an example where you had to face that challenge of communicating, and what did you say? How did you go about it? What was the situation?
Yeah, situations are most of the time. I was so used to also show inspiration to my boss and stuff, and I would put that in front of him, and he could see in his face like panic and like, why is she showing me this? What does this mean? And so I very quickly stopped doing that because I realized that was really not a way. It just didn't click with the business brain in that sense. So yeah, I think the language changes in a way that you do not, there is one thing that you don't want to do with your peers when you're at that level, and that is discuss aesthetics. I think aesthetics are really what is the expertise of the designers. And I have always tried, and then this was one thing that I learned at Nike, to move the conversation away from aesthetics and really look at what is the principle behind it. What is the customer impact? What's the guest journey? What's relevant for the business? Those are the things that really matter to that audience. And the better you can translate that and the better you can articulate that in a way, the easier the conversation. But you also understand that when you are in that level, then your role is, of course, you don't sell a design. Most of the time, you in a position where you, for instance, you need budget for something that you want to drive in your department. And yeah, so then you sit there and you have to create a business plan. And that was new to me. So I really had to learn on the job how to put that language together and also the KPIs and the principles behind it that made sense to my audience.
Can you give an example of business plan that you had to put together? Was it, let's say, for a new, I don't know, you wanted to change all the furniture, and what was the case for it? Like any, to give us a picture of what does it take, and also maybe what kind of things were not so obvious to include in it that actually made a difference?
So the interesting thing was the reason why I really wanted to go to citizenM. Back then it was, and it still is, a relatively young company compared to Nike, and it had a lot less legacy. And growing a brand was really just super appealing to me, and applying what I've learned and all of those good things. So young company, I get a relatively young team as well, as you can imagine. The team has changed over the years, and then our brand standards were basically was one big red folder with some paper in it. And that is absolutely not the standard that we needed. So I went back to my boss and said, look, we have to build proper brand standards that are captured in a, we call it BIM, a building information model. I need money for this. So that was a business case that I had to put together. So the way you sell it then is, of course, then the impact on the business is ultimately if you can deliver information faster to our construction team or to the contractor out there, you will be building faster. You can move much faster. So I give you an example. We have at citizenM standard rooms. So in the beginning, architects, they would develop our designs, and then because they can, they draw up the vanity. And then the vanity in one project is 2 centimeters longer than in the other, and creates a lot of additional work. And so I was saying, okay, we need to create these models so that they can be just passed on from project to project. It's a component, and easy peasy, we move on with it. And so the selling point was not that I needed better brand standards. The selling point was I will help you to execute faster. And that means money in the end and less stress and all of
Did you need to put a particular number on this, that by saving 2 days, you make million?
that. Yeah. So I would say, and it's not only theory, but it's also really seen in the projects, that the way we set up the design We move probably 30% faster through design development than other companies would do. And that has just to do with the fact that we're scaling a branded design, but also the work that we have created in the brand standards team to be able to just pass on to the scope that the architects don't have to do anymore. So that is definitely accelerating the process.
So what kind of things, I wonder, did you have to? That's incredible, first of all, that you're moving 30% faster than any other team. I think that's on its own, it's a metric that any company would like to have. What were the building blocks to make that happen?
I think the interesting aspect is in our world is that we work so closely with our construction team that we know a lot about what happens in the field. So we don't get too surprised of their lessons learned or our is they pass that on to us so that we can improve pretty quickly. So we got a lot of feedback from them and worked super closely with our construction teams to make sure that there is a consistent flow and a fast flow of the critical information throughout that whole process, and that we don't get distracted by too many other things. And of course, we work with so many partners when you build. There's a contractor, there's an architect, there's a technical MEP consultants, and name it. So there's a large number of participants in that whole process. And yeah, we work really closely together to make this as easy as possible for us, because we're driving efficiency at citizenM in architecture to basically buy us budgets for these wonderful front of houses and living rooms and experiences and technology and all of that. That needs to come from somewhere. So we try to be efficient in other areas.
I love this approach, very pragmatic. On one hand, not forgetting that we want those beautiful things as designers, as creators. We want to have things that maybe don't have a short-term impact and will be very difficult to prove, but at the same time, delivering the business value of efficiency, of speed through the power of design. So you still save budget in one place, so you have more budget to spend on things that as a design team, as a creative team, you are passionate about. Were there any situations where it was the other way around, when you had to battle against a decision at a C-level? So business comes to what? Let's remove all these beautiful vases and sculptures, and look, we are spending 1 million on them. Are they really needed? Cutting cost time. And how did you defend something that maybe is a bit more difficult to justify?
That is day-to-day business for architects, I would say. Because I think the building industry there's a very small margin there, and there is immense pressure on the business cases as a total. And so that means that there's a lot of ideas along the way to do things cheaper. My comment was always, it's super easy to make things cheaper. That is not a goal. That is not a challenge. The challenge is to deliver the same quality and make it cheaper. So that's where I felt, let's save on the soft cost for architecture and make that process faster and save at that end, instead of saving on the quality of the building itself, or the quality that we want to deliver for the guests, right? It's not everywhere. It is in certain particular places where we want to drive and deliver the quality levels.
I also know that you had a special report about the value that design or revenue, the extra revenue that design can actually drive, that you did internally to showcase exactly that it's not always about just cutting costs. Adding design and thinking about design strategically can add extra revenue to the company. Can you tell a little bit more about the finding from that research of how can design drive additional money, basically?
It was actually not an internal research. It was a company that we work with in the United States. They helped us to understand how well or not we are meeting expectations of the guests in the United States. And they went out to try to understand what the role of design is within the hotel industry. And I think, so the report is not final. I had a quick chat with them. They gave me first feedback, and I think the overwhelming result is that it does matter. It does matter to people, and it's a really critical element of the the journey that people go on to, right? So I think it's the interesting thing in the hotel industry is that people look for experiences and they spend their money on experiences. Maybe they like a sneaker or I don't know. But it is the truth that concerts and theaters and we all see that there's a big interest into the world of any experience. And so hospitality is part of that. That's also for us designers a really nice aspect because what we do is actually creating an emotion, right? We want to make people feel something very particular that is a really one-on-one relationship. So we have a pretty distinct design deliberately. So we want to be bold, we want to be fun, we want to be positive. So people have that experience. And sometimes our styling is a little over the top, but it does something with you when you look at it. And that is really the fascinating piece of our work is that we want to be remembered for how people feel when they are in our spaces. And that got full validation actually in that report. And that was really nice to see.
I can totally agree with what you've built, that it does create a special feelings, and citizenM is one of those places that you go and it does feel different. And we have three, I think, citizenMs in London now, and each of them are in like a special place that people just go to work from as a kind of a nice, inspiring place to be, just to sit and have a coffee with a laptop, because it is inspiring. It has that experience that I suppose is created through the power of design. I wonder, in the report that I know it's still building, so it's not final, whether any particular number is associated, and I suppose in which bucket they were. Was it to do with, let's say, people are more likely to book a hotel or hospitality experience for that matter that has, let's say, design elements or feels curated? Is it to do with retention? People more likely to book hotel again because they, again, like the experience? Or is it more on the brand that you have more visibility and maybe your customer acquisition cost goes down because all friends rave about their experience and you stand out more in the scene, in the hotel scene, because you are different? So what kind of interesting insights did you see in that report?
Yeah, I think it's exactly what you say. I think people are looking for that experience and so it's the choice they make because they want to be in a cool place. The other aspect is certainly location next to environments and design. Location plays a big role. And then the third one, where we don't really play a big role, is the loyalty programs that some of these big brands offer. Yeah, that is often a driver. But if you take all of that apart, like then design is truly a driver for brand loyalty, for reoccurring guests, and it is on top of the list of choices that people make. Yeah, it really does have an impact on what people look for.
I wonder if that's, and because I'm a big fan of citizenM, and I wonder if I'm exception or a rule here, because I definitely would prefer to stay in a place that does feel curated, does feel designed, and I pick by the area and the design of thing. But I do work in a creative industry, so it does make sense that I would love something that is beautiful and does inspire me. Did you feel like that is true because of the audience you attract, that people who are somehow connected to creative industry? Or would you say that's just everyone in the world likes good design and would pay more for the design?
It's interesting you say that because I think what you described in the beginning is exactly where this brand initiates from. So the founder was really, he comes from fashion and he had the designers and the designers would always complain, oh man, I can't stay in these beige hotels. I just can't do it. And so that was the whole idea about it. And it's really nice to see that you experience it exactly that way. I think I do believe it matters, like from all the three elements that I just described, loyalty programs or design. Yeah, it does matter who's looking at it. And we do see that, for instance, in our hotel in Menlo Park. I think we're right next to Meta, and Yet I think people love their point systems, and why we are definitely the better experience. But yes, people have different, I think, different expectations when it comes to their says. And I would say that people that come to us have a certain sensitivity towards design, and often they're surprised, and we get comments on the look and feel of the hotels.
I love what you mentioned about the loyalty programs and kind of other dots that need to be connected for design to actually work. So would love to dive a little bit into that, because I feel like a lot of, from what I'm hearing in the industry, a lot of people who get to senior positions in design, the mistakes that they often make is focus too much on design. And therefore they're like, we will advocate for design at the C-level. We will do our best to make sure design is visible. And essentially all they're doing is just talking about design, which at that level doesn't need to happen. It's all about what you said, like the kind of collaboration with the rest of the organization, understanding all the other aspects of it. And therefore, how can you use your resources, your design team, or your knowledge and your skills to be successful at that position? How can you drive extra revenue? What kind of things can you do? So I wonder, when you got to citizenM, did you identify any specific departments or partners at C-level that you would work closely with to achieve the results? So even taking the example of loyalty program, I'm sure there is like a team, the customer experience team. So which C-level people do you spend the most time with, and what kind of collaborations come out from that?
Mhm. Um, so in the beginning, when I came, there was real need to iron out some flaws in the process. And what I would say is, like, the building industry is a bit of a rough environment, and then some of that kind of spills into your organization, and that's really the last thing you want. So I think there was some work to do in working very closely with our chief development officer to help our teams to work really as one team and try to achieve the goal as good as possible. So that was the first good 2 years really to figure that out, build the right teams. And then I think the other big component is brand, of course. I work also very closely with our chief brand officer, and we both chair our creative board that we have at citizenM. And yeah, that is really about making sure that the brand evolves, that it stays alive, that it stays also consistent on the other hand, and all the good things that you need to protect your brand from all the different challenges that are out there. But at the same time, if we don't have a brand, we have nothing. We're always kind of sticking together and pick up the fights for the brand and for the guest in the end.
So brand is big part of over encompassing. Were there any first allies that you had to create to actually make it a success? Was it marketing? Who were the closest people who could understand design, but at the same time had the other influence within the company to help you achieve the results?
Yeah, and I think that was really the brand part of. So if you look back to Nike, for instance, the design function was part of the brand functions. It was marketing brand. That was where we were basically located. And so that is my intuitive go-to area, because design is of course so closely linked to, it is the expression of the brand. It is how the brand comes to life and how it's experienced out there. And yet, of course, we run into the same challenges with other departments. They have ideas on, I don't know, rolling out a new idea that is completely off brand. And then you have those tough conversations to try to articulate what it means and how the brand needs to be consistent, even if there is a lot of opportunities out there, but you have to also get very good at saying no.
Did you find any winning arguments when someone says, it's okay, we don't need it here? What were the things that you like, this something that convinces a person who doesn't understand anything about design or brand?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I had a lot of people in my team that would argue with others and say, yeah, this solution it's not on brand. That, again, if someone is not an expert in brand, in the world of branding and what brands mean, it doesn't mean anything to them. They're like, yeah, and where's the problem? So that wasn't super successful. So again, I was then also trying to, you have to bring it back to the guest. So for us, the priority is a happy guest. A happy guest is a healthy business, is revenue, and is everything else. So training everyone to argue through the lens, or look at the problems and the solutions and the opportunities through the lens of the guest and what it does for the guest, and in which way will it improve or complicate their lives, or is this really a priority for the guest, or is this a priority because you think it's a great idea? That is, I think, a really successful way in operating in design and talking about design without talking about design.
Do you always win those battles, or there are some that unfortunately don't go your way?
No, you don't win those. But I mean, I guess the corporate world is also a complex environment. And yeah, no, you don't win in every battle, but some, as they always say, you have to pick the battles that really matter, and then
How do you
then
define?
you have to really go after it, though.
Where is, I suppose, the line? How do you draw the line? Because again, the higher you get, the more challenges within the organization. So therefore, it's very easy to get drawn into battles that, yeah, maybe not worth winning. So how did you draw the line of what is important for you as a person in this position, or maybe for the organization? We're all thinking about design, so you're not gonna give up on those. And which ones, I suppose, you're okay to discuss.
Yeah, it's very much depends on the situation a little bit, right? I think for me, the red line is where it impacts the guest. I have an example here in the hotel, which I think didn't people try out ideas without really discussing things with us. And I think that is, yeah, those are, I think when it stays in the world of planning and ideation and developing ideas, and that is all fine. And I'm also super happy to think along because other people are creative and have great ideas. But I do believe that the moment it lands in a hotel, it really has to make sense for the guest. And if I don't see that, then I still have to have the conversation, I guess.
All goes back to the guest experience. I think you mentioned it a few times talking about guest experience. It does seem like it's a big part of the culture within citizenM, and I suppose that's language that is shared between all the teams, whether you are talking about finance, marketing, digital product experience, website, app, anything. You can go back to the guest experience. Is it a positive guest experience? Is it negative? Is it making it better or worse? I love that you mentioned it a few times, because I think it shows also how probably everyone communicates within the company, those challenges. So this is brilliant to hear. I want to talk to you, Claudia, about the hard times. Do you remember what was the hardest time or hardest day maybe for you in your role? Maybe it was you had to make the hardest decision. There wasn't an obvious one, the one you didn't want to make, or maybe it was just a lot that you had to take and change. Do you remember the hardest day within your over 6 years of citizenM?
Yeah, I do. And it has to do with the people. One of the experiences is, so the team has grown and changed a lot over the course of the last 6 years. And it also automatically meant that some skills were, yeah, no longer really as relevant as they were 6 years ago. So when I have to let go people, it's a very tough thing to do. And it was a particular area in my team that we're working around products. And funny enough, I looked at the team and I saw that apparently it felt like this is not the results that we need to deliver in this area. But it turned out it was the biggest team of all of the other teams. Instinctively, you put more workforce behind it to get the results out of it until you get to that moment where you say, okay, I think I have to face the reality that there is a skill problem here. And then you have to make hard decisions. And those are the moments that they're not the most enjoyable, I have to say. That's hard.
It does sound hard, and I do feel like that's something that all of us experience at least once within life, when you have to let people go, and there is, suppose there are many ways to do it wrong. There is no one way to do it right. So what are any things that you've learned through this process? What's It's not a good situation, you have to do what you have to do, but how can you make it better for the people, for yourself, for the company? How do you prepare yourself mentally, and also how do you make it better for the people who are affected by it?
Yeah, I think in the first instance, it's as well as you can explain it, it will always be a shock, right? It will always be, yeah, an unpleasant experience. So I think I have to be honest to myself that there's not a whole lot of, say, there's not a whole lot I can do to make a pleasant experience. I think that it's just not the case. I think what I try to do is to provide room for you break the news and you give people the space, and then you connect with them on one level afterwards, after a couple of days. And that was always what I tried to do, is try to keep that personal relationship with them and explain it a little bit more in detail, what the reasons were, and also hear what their thoughts were, just going through that experience, offering help in the next steps, and yeah, trying to keep that relationship going. I think that was one thing that I was actively trying to do.
That's very thoughtful. And I feel like at the end of the day, we are all humans, and we might change jobs and careers, but the relationships we have between humans is something that can stay for life. Did it, did you stay in touch with people, from the people that you had to let go? Did you manage to have the relationship with them after?
Loosely, I would say. So I follow them, of course. I see where they end up, but I also know that other team members, they go out for dinners, and so I, yeah, I would have really no issue. And I think I hope that they would also feel that they could always reach out if there was something I could do for them. I would do it for sure.
That's good to hear. And I do feel like it's very rare actually in companies when that feeling is still there. And I think that's great, because again, we all will change through careers and jobs, but creative industry actually is quite small. It feels big, but it's actually quite small when you do encounter the same people in other companies, and it's
Yeah,
good to have those
but this is also a little bit what's really interesting is if you change industries. So change from architecture to retail, and I'm now in hospitality. And hospitality is beautiful because it is about people. This is their job. And so what you preach to the outside, you also have to practice to the inside. And it's just the nature of that industry, a little bit polar opposite of what building industry would be, for instance.
Very true, very true. Were there also any mistakes that you made in your journey that were probably painful and you wish you knew something before making those mistakes? Do you remember any particular examples of any mistake that you made?
Yeah, I find that hard to answer because I think mistakes are not really a category in which I look at my career. I can tell you many failures and
Let's talk about
moments.
failures. Yeah, let's
Yeah,
talk about failures.
exactly. So where moments where I felt like, oh my God, this is really not for me. One of them was right in the beginning of my career. I started to work in the agency of my professor, and what he did is he took these young professionals and put them in his competition team. So we would do competitions, and I don't know, we didn't have a click. I just could not do what he wanted me to do, and this situation was like really, it was just, yeah, awful to be in, right? Like you want to deliver, but I didn't know what he had in his head, and I couldn't put it on paper what he had in his mind. Yeah, I think that was a failure in the moment, but then it led me to what I actually wanted to learn, which was building buildings and how that works and how to put buildings together and understand the process from inception, ideation, all the way through to construction. That's what I actually wanted to learn after uni. And a failure often then turns into something quite positive, actually. And I had that a couple of times along the way where I felt like, okay, might have been not a super success story, but in the end, it led to something quite positive.
Brilliant, love it. Anything when you were already very senior, any failures that you had there, or moments where you actually thought, you know what, maybe this whole leadership thing is not for me. It's too much and it's too stressful, and I'm not sure I would prefer to do more of a craft than all the stressful stuff.
That's a good one. I think I will probably never feel fully comfortable in a room with finance and sales and marketing people. It's just not the way my brain is wired. I understand it and I made a deliberate effort to understand and have to understand it. But is it my choice? Is that where I take pleasure from? Probably not. Yeah, you get into situations where the hard numbers get discussed, and yeah, that is really then not much that I can contribute to. So those are the moments where I feel like, how much value am I adding here right now in this moment in this room? But yeah, and in other moments, it turns around and it is a different group and a different question.
And how do you overcome that? Because I do feel like that feeling is not very unique to your situation. I think creatives, as soon as they get around people working in finance and other very different mindsets, it becomes very intimidating. And I suppose you learn the language, you try to understand, but were there any particular things that helped you to feel more confident and comfortable in those conversations?
Yeah, yeah. I think, you know what? I think it is also not needed to always be the one who's speaking. I think silence can be very powerful. And you have your moment because all the numbers, again, in my world and in my thinking, they all will end up in what does it deliver for the guest. If we deliver something beautiful and wonderful for the guest, we'll come back. And so that's my moment when I can join to the conversation. I can join on the matrix and all of certain areas of the business plans that are just not my core competency. And then I'm totally fine with not participating in that conversation. So in other words, I think there's also a bit of a perception that you have to be always on point and you have to know everything and you have to be the loudest in the room and otherwise you don't make a career. And I think that is not true. It's not true. I think it's silence can be very powerful also when you lead, just listening and be silent is extremely powerful. So again, you don't need to be always the expert in everything in the room. And I think no one really expects that from you as well. That's why we have diverse teams. And some people are stronger in certain moments and others are stronger in other moments. So I think that it's also in these days an accepted observation.
This is a brilliant advice, to be honest, to be silent in those meetings, because you can learn so much from the conversations. And you're right, you don't need to be always the one who is talking. And definitely learning from people in the room is the best way where you can actually make a meaningful impact. We're about to go into the audience questions. We have so many on so many different topics, so I'll try to go through as many of them as possible. So let's start with Hugo, who is asking very precisely, how do you quantify the return on investment of design decisions at citizenM? Are there specific metrics you look at to evaluate the impact of design on your business?
Okay. Yeah, that's an interesting question because that would be exactly how my CFO would ask me as well. So I think for me, again, I like to talk about the design process because that's where the money sits. The longer you have a consultant team working on a project, the more it costs you. Yeah, every day costs you X amount of money. So that's a relatively easy calculation you can make. If your design process is 30% faster, yeah, you have a saving right there. That is definitely something how we look at it. I don't like to go into the product because the product it's not a category for the product really. I would hate to lower the quality standards and make that a conversation about return of investment because it is quite intangible and there is no KPI that would answer that question. The one we KPI we look at is NPS. So that's core. So that is something that we look at is, are people happy with what we deliver to them? Would they recommend us and all of those things? So there's matrix behind it, but that would be the only one that I would find relevant for us.
Love it. So I think NPS time saved by improving the process, I think two very clear and very good metrics. Thank you for sharing them. We also have lots of questions about the role of Chief Design Officer and essentially what does it mean, how to create one. So we have a question from Mucho Mark. How does a CDO position come to be within a company? How does a company decide to have a Chief Design Officer or a Chief Branding Officer? Were you instrumental in creating this position as citizenM? If not, do you know how it happened?
Yeah, I was part of it because I think, again, citizenM is a company that is trying to keep the matrix very flat. That means you don't have too many layers. And at some point, I think I was hired as a managing director. And then at some point I was in the leadership team and I was like, okay, that means automatically I'm a chief now. It's sometimes, I tried to say that earlier, it's just a title. And it could have many other titles. It could be a VP, it could be an MD. So it doesn't per se in our world mean something very specific. I think every role would be slightly differently depending on the industry and depending on the company and the size of the company. And we're really small. We have 36 hotels and we operate globally, but yeah, it's a small team.
This is a great answer. I would love to challenge you though on this answer because I feel like you are saying that the name of the position is not as important. And I agree with you, definitely. I think in general, sometimes we keep chasing positions and we actually should be chasing what we want to do, not the title. Saying that, I do feel like it is talking about marketing and brand. It is a certain brand if you have a C in your position. If it's implied that you are at a C level, that you're making certain decisions, it communicates a certain value within the organization that design is taken seriously, that we do have someone at that level. And it's not every organization is ready to take that step to even say that we want design at C level. From what I'm hearing, I feel like citizenM was very much creative-driven company and design-driven company. Was there a chief design officer before you, or you were the first one?
There was one in the beginning, yes. Then that person left at some point, and then there was a long time there was no, and then only when I came back on board.
Ah.
Yeah, no, I do agree, and I definitely agree with what you say. I'm just saying that this role could be anything if it was in a different context. But it is true that this is a design-driven company because design is part of the product that we deliver, and that is understood by, I think, the senior leadership.
Brilliant. We had a question actually submitted earlier specifically about the roles and designers. How do they choose to accept or not to accept the role? Especially as we just discussed, the role itself might not mean anything. There might be another chief design officer role somewhere. It might be called VP of design. It might be called something else. So when you were choosing to accept, because it feels like you were very strategic throughout your career, you worked for incredible companies, you worked for Nike, now it is citizenM. And how do you know if you actually will enjoy being in the role? And because it's not an easy role, so you will have a lot of ups and downs. So what kind of green flags or red flags do you look at when someone suggests that you should join a company or accept a certain role?
Mm. Yeah, that was, of course, a big step for me to leave Nike and then start to work for citizenM. But I always had that in the back of my mind that I wanted to go for a younger brand. So that was a good match. And also the most important aspect of it was the culture, because if you work for a company like Nike, it's great environment and we could have a session only on that. But for me, the most important thing was that the culture was really what they were advertising. And of course, you never know until you're really there. But I had, of course, many conversations before I came on board, and I tried to find out as much as I could whether the values that we communicate, whether those are the values that are also lived in the organization. And that's for me was the big driver, really, besides all the, say, more career aspects of it. But the last bit, I think, of a decision like that, it comes from the gut. And that's where, yeah, that is exactly how this went. So, yeah.
I suppose, yep, everything in life is part intuition, part logic. There is no best way to assess it. We have lots of questions about citizenM's brand, which again is very iconic and very stylish. And we have people asking, how do you actually stay consistent within the brand, at the same time customizing it to every location that you open? Are there any brand principles as well that you use as part of the brand that everyone is aware of? And if so, how do you embed them or get people to embrace and adopt them? Nothing is asking.
Yeah, there's a very distinct strategic approach to citizenM. So first and most obvious is that we have very small rooms. They are standard and we're scaling them. So there's a lot of efficiency. There's our world of efficiency, right? Like where we try to be as rational as we can. That buys us basically the quality levels in the room. So we have very good showers. We have 5-star mattresses. So we have really good acoustics. So you sleep really well. And all of that good quality levels only come from the fact that we stay consistent in the room and with the designs, and we can scale it, because through the scaling, of course, we get a lot of like economy of scale. So we're saving some money there by not having to redo it every time we do a new hotel. That's the rational part of it. And then we go and then we deliver then we create these front of houses that are extra large, and they have all kinds of different shape areas that you can use. Of course, you have breakfast there, but all the functions that happen across the entire day are basically happen in the same space, which is super nice because it really creates energy in space, and it is very social and people hang out, and that is the intention of the space. And it is not like you come into a hotel and the first thing is like a person behind a counter and an empty breakfast room because the breakfast has closed an hour ago. But so it is a very different proposition, and that is the concept, and that is what we're scaling. And the way we make it relevant to the location is through narrative. So we really try to tailor it to the location through research in the environment, in the location, and where we are, and bringing some of that flavor into the hotels through the styling, through the art. A lot of our art is customized for the hotel. So we're really lucky. We have an art curator, and she is amazing. She finds the artists, and then artists create art for the facades or for the rooms or for the interiors. Yeah, that is the good balance between super rational and really the liberty to create something very bespoke at the same time.
This is great to hear. And is there in a practical way, is there a physical document where you define these rules and guidelines? Do you have overall high level principles? In the practical, where is it stored? How does it look? And how is it communicated to whoever needs to have access to it?
This is what I called the brand standards earlier in our conversation. That is very detailed documented. So we have these 3D models that I touched on earlier. There's a large number, like a whole database of specifications that we have identified. We have design narratives to explain why certain rooms have to look in a certain way, or how the relationship is from the pantry to the front of house and all of those good things. So it's very detailed, and yeah, it's because we're repeating it over and over again. We have to be also clear what we're expecting, because otherwise you start all over again. That is a bit of a mixed bag, right? Because on the one hand side, you want to be bespoke and you want to create all the time, but we're creating basically on a scalable level for the most part. And I think for me, it's a super interesting mix between those two approaches about, efficiency and scalability. And on the other hand, delivering a really creative environment and bespoke elements that come from the location.
Love it. Next question we have from Alexandra. What skills you learned as an architect that are still helpful in your today's position?
That's funny because because when I started at citizenM, I told the founder, I was like, okay, you have to realize I'm not an architect anymore. I have not worked in architecture for 14 years. And he's, yeah, that's perfectly fine. That's exactly what we wanted. And don't worry about it. So I arrive in my job and I find out that it was so heavy on architecture that I was so glad that I had those 10 years of experience with the products, with the processes, with the personalities you have to deal with, that whole industry. So to be honest with you, without that knowledge, I would have not been able to be successful in the role. Not at all. So it was a bit of a misperception from our founder, I think, thinking that me coming from retail and being very much trained in storytelling and branded spaces and rolling out concepts and all of that and creating concepts that are scalable and all those. So that was more of the areas that I learned in Nike, but that would have by far not been enough. So I still use a lot of it. Everyone who is an architect in the audience, there is a lot of opportunities outside the agency work or careers that you know.
Brilliant. Great hope for all architects and all creators that you still need your skills, even no matter how high you get, how far you get. Kirsten is asking, which projects you have been pitching yourself had the most revenue impact? How did you succeed?
I'm not sure I understand what the question.
Anything that you led in general in the organization that you felt like that had the biggest business impact? I think you already mentioned brand as something that you took on, but maybe a small example, something that you took on as a thing and in actually.
I think, there's one thing that I'm really passionate about, and that is when we start working on projects, I really truly believe we have to create very good narratives. And what I mean by narratives is like, so what is the story about this hotel? And where are we? And why are we here? And what is it that people should know about this place in the city? And there are so many beautiful stories in cities, of course, because over the years, there's tons of stuff that is really nice to know. And that was not a methodology that was really practiced when I came in. And so I'm still working with my team to help each other to dive deep enough into these narratives, because I think that is really critical for almost everyone. And it's also so beautiful if you see, for instance, our staff, if of course, they're the most important ones, right? They deliver the guest experience in the end of the day. But we can help them by creating these stories for them. And so that if someone tells a story about the neighborhood and how this person has done good in the neighborhood, and that's why we created this beautiful art piece here, and it refers to it. So that those are ways to connect with the guest on a very personal and meaningful way. And this is exactly what we would like our staff to do in the hotels, have those not scripted, personal conversations. And I think that we can help them with those stories, with the storytelling to, engage.
This is brilliant. And was it like do you literally train them on all the stories that they can, how does it happen in practice?
Yeah, that's a good question, because we have a very particular way of how to recruit. We call it casting days. So we just invite everyone who wants to potentially work here. And then they do all kinds of games and stuff. And the whole goal of this is to see how they interact, because the principle in citizenM is that we hire nice people, because that's the thing, you cannot train anyone. Right? You can train people to make a really good coffee, but if that person is a grumpy person in the morning, then it's maybe not the right place to be. So the approach is really always to go to find these people that are naturally nice people and engaged and interested in other people. That is easy, right? And there's no script at all. They're very much empowered to do anything they need to do to make the guest happy, basically. And yeah, that's also where technology plays a big role, because technology is big. A lot of our processes are supported by technology. Our rooms are remote controlled. Our check-in is through self-check-in. So there's a lot of technology. And the technology as such is, of course, not our interest in our business. It is only there to take all the work off the shoulders of the staff so that they can deliver that human connection with the guest. And yeah, so we do a few things to remove every burden from them and have them be just a nice person.
This is brilliant. I love how it always goes back to humans and human nature. You have to hire the right people who intuitively know what does good experience feel like and how they can make someone interact and have a great time. And then you can't train that, but all the other things you can give on top as technology and other things. But at the end of the day, it comes down to humans who love other humans and would be happy to communicate with them in everyday manner. I have a few more questions about the future, and we have one question about the future of hospitality. So that was, first of all, Olga is asking, are there any trends in hospitality or design industry that you're seeing at the moment that might be interesting, that kind of will create any sort of shifts in the future?
I think one of the most important trends, if you want to say, it's not a trend, but it's just something that we all experience, is that people need relief from the stress that we live every day. And I think mental health or self-care or whatever you want to call it is a big need for everyone. So that will grow, I think, and not in the form of adding more spas to the hotels and all of these exclusive things, but like smaller and more accessible ways of lowering stress levels and getting off the social media, remove yourself from a lot of those pressure points that are in your lives, and just have an experience of tranquility and or relaxation. I think those are the things that are easy to deliver when you do a resort and you're in the countryside and you have naturally an environment in which you can deliver that. The interesting part for me is, how do you deliver that in an urban environment without being cliche and create another spa somewhere, which, yes, of course, that helps, but there must be other ways. And we've been experimenting with it as well, looking in what would well-being look like for citizenM, where we have no room for anything, basically. How would we deliver that to our guests? And yeah, we're still working on it, but I'm super excited about it because I do believe it is very relevant to all of us.
That's a great trend, and I do agree with it. So that's something we all crave and need, to be in a space that can help us relax and feel different from our day-to-day life. And nature is one of the ways to do it, but I suppose there are many more things to explore how that can be achieved. Following up on this question, Bernardine is asking, you mentioned the need to keep freshness as well as consistency in the brand and hotel experience. How do you incorporate context shifts, changing customer demands, hospitality trends, design trends, architecture, interior, and sell the benefits of any changes to leadership? And related to that, has there been a focus on establishing and protecting signature experience citizenM, and what's the role of design in that? I think it's a two-part question. Let's start with the first one. How do you adapt to these future trends and changes that are needed to happen, and how do you communicate?
Yeah, the beauty of that is that everything that shifts or becomes slightly, has a different meaning or importance to people, it all happens for the most part either in the room or in the front of house. So as an example, we have seen that after COVID, people traveled for longer. So they might have traveled less, but they have stayed longer. So our average stay in a hotel is now 2 days or something, 2 nights. And that, of course, means that they have a meeting and they go out and have this meeting, but then they come back to the hotel. Our approach to working in the hotel was pretty simplistic, if you want. You have these beautiful meeting rooms, but they cost a lot of money. or you work in a relatively loud environment that is super open. So what we've been working on lately was looking into more differentiation in the setting of being able to work in the hotels, to create a bit more differentiation, being able to make phone calls or network or meet your business partner in the hotel without having to listen to the music or whatever it is that it distracts you. So we know where these places are, and we know what our limitations are as well. So again, we will never be a hotel where you will celebrate your honeymoon and have a spa experience. That will never happen. We are very much focused on business travelers and travelers who go to the city centers, and they're out there and come back and stuff. But that is just it's a choice that we made, and I think that is also part of the success of citizenM.
Love it. We have one more question related to future, specifically around sustainability. So I think that's something that in design industry, it's not even a trend. This is just, it's part of the job.
Yeah.
How, first of all, do you think about sustainability? And we have a question from Stuart Trevor, who, as you might know, the founder of All Saints, very famous fashion brand. So he's very passionate about sustainability, and he's asking, have you ever thought of producing sustainable uniforms in the hotels? So how do you think about sustainability, and have you thought of producing sustainable uniforms?
Thanks for the question. Yeah, I think I share the passion, and I think almost everyone does, I hope at least. We are in an interesting business we're building. So we get measured by, on one hand side, what the quality of our hotels are, so the building itself, and in operations, so what's our energy consumption, what is our waste management, all of those things, climate resilience, all of these things are measured in operation, and then the other part is in construction. And we are scoring really well. So we have made a huge effort in the last 4 years. My colleague has done an incredible job in making sure we score in all the points. And it's not easy, right? It is very heavy lifting when it comes to building. That's the unfortunate thing, because you are part of a huge organism. It's called the city, and you are on the grid of the grid. You have so many variables that you're impacted by, which is, that's the challenge of architecture, I would say, in general. But when it comes to the uniforms, I can provide you with more information. I think there's also a good story about the uniforms, but I don't have that from the top of my head right now.
I think what we can do also is just think about it. I don't think there is one answer. So I love that you already have development in that area. One question that I suppose we couldn't avoid in today's world of the conversation is the question about AI. So Larry's asking, does citizenM have plans to use AI to enhance its design process from construction to physical experience and digital interactions to supplement human touches?
Oh, to supplement human touches? Oh, that takes it really far. I think, I guess in customer service or in those repetitive works or in the data area, we are using AI. So where it makes sense to basically take some load off people's shoulders to make their lives easier, that's where we use it. In the hotel, again, I think if you're in the hotel, it's about the human connection. And I don't see a role of AI in that moment. I do see it in a lot of other areas and also in the planning part. So I spoke about the BIM models earlier and building information models. Those models, we work with a program where we can drop our models into a Google environment that is actually the actual location so you get all the data of that location, and you can already gauge what the climate impact is and what the light situation is. And so those are things that are really exciting, and that's where we pay attention to, but not in the operation. So that, I think, will hopefully remain a touch and feel.
Remaining human, yes, to that. I do agree. There is a role for everything. And I also do like human beings. And if we are going to physical spaces, there should be physical things. But AI does have incredible opportunity in so many areas. Well, we don't want to spend our time and hours and would rather spend it in beautiful hotels talking to beautiful humans. I have one last question left for Claudia, which we ask to all of our guests that come to on our podcast, which is a bit philosophical question. If you could change one thing in the world, what would it be?
I think I would eliminate poverty. And I think because if the moment we don't have to worry about whether we have something to eat or not, and we have to fight for survival, I think that is the moment when our humanity really starts to kick in. And I think that would change many things in the world. So I guess that would be my answer.
I could not agree more. I think we are in the year 2024 with all the eyes in the world, and I think the basic thing is still not solved. So we definitely should try to think how, as a global community, we can solve the basic needs. Thank you so much, Claudia. I feel like we could have spent another hour talking about all things business and design and leadership, and it is so great to hear your insights into your role and also in your vision of what design can impact can have in an organization. I do feel like we don't talk about it enough as a design community, and seeing someone like you doing this day to day with such ease, but also not turning into a completely business person, I have to say. I love how you talk about design and guest experience and still very human interaction. And I do feel like that's what board level needs, a human who thinks about other humans. And that's what design can bring to the C-level. And I hope there will be many more chief design officers and chief creative officers in the boardroom like you, who think about humans, who think about design and creativity, but also drive the company forward future through sustainability, through business impact, through everything else that board level already is thinking about. But thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. It's so incredible. And I loved our conversation. So thank you.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
And thanks everyone for joining. I think this is it for tonight. Special thanks for all of you who stayed until the end. We love having all of you with us today. Please share your insights, things that you've learned, things that surprised you, and your own thoughts on the role of Chief Design Officer in the industry and whether design should be in the boardroom. And please tag at Future London Academy so we know your thoughts, so we can actually compile the idea of what does the industry think about design in the boardroom. So you're all coming from wonderful different countries and places. So please share, what do you think about design in the boardroom? And I can see so many thanks to Claudia and so many actually admiration to your hotel. I couldn't even read all the comments that people had about how much they enjoy the experience of citizenM and how smart you are about technology, about the design, about creating a special atmosphere in the place. So whatever you do, you are nailing it. So thank you so much for it. And thanks everyone for listening.